Conor MacDonald, though, is Head of Economics and Social Policy at Policy Exchange, a think tank who studied some of the issues around this. Good afternoon to you, Conor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Are you broadly in favour of the idea here that if you're on disability benefit, one of the big concerns is that if you go back to work, you'll lose your benefit and it'll be incredibly hard to get it back again should you need to leave the workforce? And this is one of the solutions.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a good step forward. Obviously, we need to see the detail, but I think it does show that the government is really serious about the problem of inactivity. And I think more broadly than this proposal, I think the really positive news about this and how the government's been speaking about it is that they clearly want to move from a model where you prove that you can't work to asking respondents what work they could possibly do. So that is to say, instead of this really perverse disincentive where effectively you're constantly trying to prove to the government, to the state, how little or how incapable you might be, and therefore are in receipt of benefit. It's a model where you're trying to work with the person to see how they can interact in work, maybe fewer hours, maybe more, and ideally find a model that works better for each individual. So I think in that sense, I think it's a very positive step.
Does it get to the core of the issue, though? Many people at the moment who are claiming sickness benefit are actually doing so. The numbers skyrocketed because of the amount of people who are off work because of mental health conditions. And I just wonder whether it's all very well enticing people back to work with financial incentives, but actually shouldn't the government be addressing the root cause here and look to maybe help people with their mental health conditions and find them a way back into the workplace through getting better and through supporting them in that way rather than just handing them some cash?
Absolutely. I think it might be worth foregrounding this discussion in the sense that many major developed economies are dealing with problems in their labour market. Often, at this point, demand is outstripping supply. But the UK is very unique in the sense that it seems to have had a very particular shock, and that is to say, a reduction in the labour supply and the number of people in the workforce. And evidence suggests this is to do with NHS backlogs. This is to do with the profile of people who have left the workforce. So in the UK, there's a particular problem that we don't see in other G7 economies where people over 50 have left the workforce. Sometimes for medical reasons, but other times related to early retirement. So I think there's a whole gamut of things that we could do. I'll give you one example. I'm a Canadian. The Canadian government has last year announced a very substantial package of childcare reforms. And this has led, in the latest labour market statistics from Canada, a significant increase in labour market participation for women of childbearing age, basically, women in the workforce, basically, in around 25 to 40. All that to say, that there are actually things you can do. They don't all reside in the benefit system. This is really a whole of government problem, and it's a very particular in how it's played out, a very particular problem to the UK as well.
It does feel like, Conor, having childcare provision, a decent, decent childcare provision, which we don't have at the moment, which we're crying out for, which, Rishi Sunak's put some reforms suggested by Liz Truss forward. He's put those on the back burner for now. It feels like such a kind of easy win for the government. The problem, though, might be this, is that many mums who are not working are not necessarily claiming benefits. They are living off their husband's income if their husband earns enough. So therefore, they yes, will boost the workforce, boost productivity, get more of Britain working and boost the economy, but they're not necessarily costing the government anything in terms of benefits.
Yeah.
So is that potentially why the government's dragging their feet on that? Most of the initiatives here are all focused on people claiming disability benefit or tax breaks, as we said, for older people who've left work because they don't want to be in the workplace anymore.
Can I pick you up on this? I think this is on in terms of potential tax incentives. This also sort of highlights one of the difficulties here, which is actually we're talking about the benefit system, but the evidence suggests that a significant number of the people who have left the workforce in the UK, so over 50s, and of those over 50s, they're more likely to have a degree, they're more likely to be self-employed, and they're more likely to be in professional occupations. These are all demographic traits that suggest that you don't actually interact with the benefit system all that much. And so now you have this situation where part of the reason there's been a labour supply contraction is that the people who have left the workforce are people who don't necessarily interact with the state very much, and therefore the state doesn't necessarily have the levers or the tools to encourage them back into the workforce. And this is why the government, I suspect, is looking seriously at tax incentives, because this might really be one of the few tools they have in their toolbox. It's not really a problem that the British government has had to deal with before. These are not groups of people that you usually expect to see a significant employment drop from.
Okay, and just wrapping this up, Conor, in terms of the system being open to abuse, we sort of also need to look at that as well. If someone's over 50 and gone back into the workplace and they enjoy, here is being suggested, perhaps to be free of having to pay income tax entirely for 6 months to a year, that might entice people back and forth from the workforce, whereas there are other people over 50 who are showing up for their job every single day and not sort of getting any benefits at all for doing so.
Absolutely. I mean, you've touched on one of the really difficult problems here, is that how do you create incentives that aren't open to abuse, and also kind of create a level playing field for different kinds of workers. It would probably be a sort of a perverse incentive if people who are already working don't get this benefit, and only those enticed back into the workforce. You're absolutely right. These are just kind of potential proposals at this point. The government is going to have I think, quite a difficult job in designing these in an appropriate way. But it is a really long-term ongoing problem that needs to be solved.
Well, at least people are thinking about it. Conor MacDonald, Head of Economics and Social Policy at Policy Exchange, thanks for speaking to us. Thank you.